today's guest is Dominique Benson. She has her own tutoring agency, and I know I didn't, there she is. I know I didn't officially write about it, but tutors and no. Dominique is saying that you're unable to join, but I can't see you if you've joined. Oh, wait. I see you. Okay,
Oh, you can see me
great.
now?
Yes. Beautiful smile. All right, wonderful. So I was just saying that before you even introduce yourself, I interviewed a psychologist and Harvard Medical School professor and author earlier this week, and he said that that tutors are amazing, and I'll get into why and how they can really help. But before we even start, thank you so much for coming on. And why don't you give a little bit about your background? Because when you and I met, I loved that we have the education background in common because we could really relate.
Yes, of course. So my background is fairly extensive because technically by training, I'm a research scientist. My undergrad was in biochemistry and biology, so I double majored. We're not going to discuss that. And then for my master's, I got a biomedical science master's.
Wow. So that is completely different from me. But then you started this tutoring business that's not about that.
Yeah, so when I started the tutoring company, it was with the focus on getting more kiddos interested in math and science because those are the subjects that kids really have issues with. And if they just had a little bit of extra push and a little bit of extra attention, then they would go from hating it to loving it. But it just turned into something even bigger. But our specialty will always be math and science because that's my heart. And I feel like every kid should love it because it's fun.
Yeah. Okay, you and I are different with that. I mean, I agree with you. I personally, it's not my strength, but wonderful to have people like you. But the reason that that's part of the reason I had you on. But the main thing is because we talked about how the community that's listening to this or watching us have children or young adult children who are dealing with a lot of stress because of their families going through either a high conflict divorce or separation or custody battle, or the aftermath of a difficult co-parenting life where they're bounced back and forth and again, is tremendous stress. And so often our clients' exes do not want these kids who desperately need therapy to have therapy. And one of the things that Dr. Christopher Willard said the other day was that tutors are unsung therapists. So I thought I want to start off today's interview with that line. Tell the world how tutors are unsung therapists and the role that they can play in helping our children get through rough situations.
Well, first, I hope you know I'm totally stealing that. Because that's a great way to describe what tutors are. And the reason why I wholeheartedly agree is because we're typically with these students an hour, 2 hours a week. And that may seem like a small thing, but it is like therapy. We get to see their highs and lows. They vent to us. I have students that when I'll start the session, I do like a mental check-in with them and just say, hey, how are you doing? What did you do fun this weekend? What happened in so-and-so's class last week? I know you had a big project due. I just check in with them. And many of my students will just word vomit. And they will tell me all the things that's happening, whether that's school related, family related. And I just listen. They aren't telling me to get solutions or answers. They just want somebody who's going to listen to them and allow them to vent because they're people too. They have issues just like adults have issues, but people like to minimize them. When if you take 10 minutes and just listen to them vent, now they can focus on their work. Now they can move forward in whatever they're dealing with academically, knowing that, oh, I finally got that off my chest because I was frustrated about XYZ, or I was upset that so-and-so was at the top of the pyramid on the cheerleading squad and I wasn't, and I worked hard for it. Like, you hear all the things and it sounds very small to us as adults because we're dealing with mortgages and sick parents, but those kids have feelings too, so we need to listen to them.
Yeah, and I think I told you that when I used to teach high school English, so I worked directly with lots of teenagers, we had a lot of freedom of what we could do in our classroom. And so every day at the beginning, I would turn off the lights, and we had this thing called an overhead projector where you'd put something on it and it would project it onto a screen. And so I'd start with a quote. So the kids would come into like a dark, quiet room, take out their journals, and they could either write about the quote or something else for the first few minutes. And then we talk for a couple minutes, and then we'd start class. Because exactly like what you said, kids need a break and they need to pause, and they usually don't get it during their daily lives. And the kids that our community is dealing with are dealing with a lot more, like I said, stress and chaos. And so they need it even more. So I love that someone like you and the people that work for you recognize that, and recognize that we all need to be listened to, but especially kids, and especially kids in these really difficult situations where maybe people are too distracted with what they're dealing with. You didn't put on your list court, which is our number one thing. So court, where they can't give their kids that emotional attention because they're just, wrapped up in other things. So one thing, Dominique, you told me about was a story with a kid that you worked with for about 4 years, who was homeschooled. Do you remember that story?
Yes, he's one of my favorites. Look, don't tell my other students that, but he is definitely one of my favorites. This young man, I had been with him for years. I knew the family very well, and the mom pulled me aside and she was like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know we're going through a divorce, and he's not taking it very well." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine. I do understand that." So I made sure when I worked with him, and I think I was working with him twice a week at that point in time. Every time we sat down together, I would just check in. How are you doing? What's happening? I let him get his feelings out. And especially, as I'm sure you remember working in the school, dealing with boys is very different than dealing with girls.
Yeah.
So you can't push too hard because that's when they shut down. There's ADHD pills because I couldn't focus on anything. And I needed to focus because I have to pass these classes. And I could tell just by looking at him that it was like the weight of the world was on him. And for him to even let me know he was taking his brother's pills just to get through his assignments, that touched me in a different way. And of course, I informed his mom. His mom was like, "Yeah, I know he does it sporadically. It's not anything consistent. It's just when he has a lot of deadlines, he just needed to focus." And I'm like, "All right, you're the mom. I'm not saying anything." But that made me be more aware of students going through traumatic events, especially divorce. Because he's a great kid. Like, I still work with him to this day. But during those months of the divorce, and it got kind of bad, I made sure that I saw him those 2 sessions per week. Because my thing is, there may be something that I see that his mom and dad aren't seeing. So I would just periodically tell the mom, "Hey, he did good today, but I could tell it wasn't the best of what he could give me right now." And I told her, I was like, "I don't, as far as payment, I know you're going to pay me, but I want to make sure I work with him. So even if we need to drop down to once a week, let's do that. But I don't want to walk away in the midst of him dealing with this, because I was the constant in his life during that entire period. Because the mom was moving out, and then grandparents were."
Oh, wait. Okay. Your volume went off for like 2 seconds. That's okay. So you,
Sorry
so you
about
said you were
that.
the constant in his life.
Yes, I wanted to be sure that I was the constant in his life in the midst of all this craziness, because he's having to move households, and even being homeschooled, you just disrupted his entire structure. So I stayed with that family, and after that, he had a showcase, and I went to the showcase. I was like, "I'm gonna go because I want to be there for him." And both parents were there, the grandparents, and one of the grandparents actually walked up to me and she was like, "You must be the tutor that's been working with him." And I'm like, "Yes." And she just gave me a hug. Never seen the woman again in my life, but she knew that's who I was. And I just showed her. I was like, "I want to see you do your showcase," because they were doing flips and it was a whole theatrical production. And so me being there, I don't think he expected me to show up when he sent me the information. And I'm like, "No, I'm technically part of the family at this rate."
Yeah. And we talked about that almost as like a title to this talk about we talk about how it takes a village to raise a child, and a tutor can really be an intimate have an intimate relationship within this community that really helps kids get through these rough times, even if they're not dealing with a divorce, but just to have someone there, because I imagine that a kid like that might not have had access to a therapist.
Even if he did, I've had students that I know that were in therapy, but they still like having that outside opinion or just somebody who's not going to give an opinion. And I think that's what some people miss, because if you're talking to a therapist, they're constantly probing and asking more questions. I don't know what question to ask, so I'm not going to ask those. I'm just going to listen and just say, okay, if you need me to do anything for you, let me know. I'm here to help. And they can take it as they please, but they don't have to worry about me digging deeper and them having to actually figure out things, because that's not my position.
Right. And you know what? That makes me think about something that that Dr. Willard said the other day too with therapy, that sometimes kids and people in general think, well, I don't want to go to therapy because then it means like something's wrong with me. There's this stigma that could be attached, but with tutoring, it's like everybody you know has academics and goes to school and can use help with things. So you don't have that association attached to you, that negative, that possibly negative association that kids, especially teenagers, might have, like, oh my gosh, I'm being forced into therapy.
I got to talk about my feelings, and I don't even know my feelings.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so you mentioned that with that particular kid that you were a constant in his life, and I told you that in terms of court issues, that one thing that judges pay attention to is exactly that: consistency, stability, and routine in a child's life. Like, what do you see about the importance of consistency, other than just say you personally being a constant? But what do you see regarding consistency in terms of kids and academics, or whatever else you guys work with kids on?
Yes. So in academics, having them set up weekly sessions creates that routine that they need in their life. Because I get a lot of students, or my team gets a lot of students that are afraid to ask questions in class because they don't want to ask the dumb question. They don't want to feel singled out. So with them, it's about, okay, they can ask me any question they want to ask, and I'm not going to respond to it. I'm not going to say that was a stupid question. Nobody's in the background laughing like it may be in a class situation, but they can sit here and ask me even the most mundane questions that they feel like they learned years ago, which they may have, but there's nothing else in this world but me and them just having a conversation.
Wow.
So from them having that weekly time period, they know every week that if they didn't feel comfortable asking the question in class, or they didn't know how to ask the question, and that's a huge one. They don't even know how to put the words in order to figure out what they're trying to ask. And I tell them, just whatever you're thinking, just spit it out. And by the time they tell me all the things that's going through their head, I'm able to pull out the actual question and answer them in a very safe space. So that's why I have so many families that stay with us for a year or even just half a school year. And now that they know the foundations, they're not as scared to ask questions in class. Their confidence increases across the board, not just in the class that we're tutoring them on. So that routine is pivotal to building that confidence in an academic setting.
Yeah, and I love how you noted that it's a safe space, because again, we always think about therapy as a safe space, and other places that are not safe spaces. But then again, there's an adult and a child or young adult, and it's just the two of them. And the example you gave with, I forget that high school in particular, kids are like, oh no, I don't want to say something stupid. They're so concerned with their appearance. And that matters. But having a tutor, a private tutor outside of school, they can say whatever they want and ask whatever they need.
Yep,
and
no
get all this
giggling in the background, because we all know kids may be giggling about something else or something they read, but as a student, you feel like, oh, they're all laughing at me because I just asked that question.
Right, right, right. Wow. So speaking of that, considering that the kids we're talking about, or young adults, have parents that are really wrapped up in their own drama with court and divorce and fighting with exes and whatever else, why is it so important for people in this particular community to have a tutor, a good tutor for their kids during a time like this, a really stressful time?
Because if the parent is focusing on the court trial and trying to get documentation, they're missing a lot with their kiddos. Like, so they may not realize they got an email saying, oh, Sally failed this last exam, so now her grades just dropped to a C. And it could be one email. And we all know how many emails we get in a day, whether you're a parent or a business owner. There are tons and tons. So just having somebody like me that checks in, it says, okay, I remember you had an exam last week. Have you gotten your grades back? Okay, if you haven't, has your teacher let you know when she's going to grade them? Or you have gotten it back. Have you looked over it? Want me to look over it with you? So that's something parents will do when everything is good. Like, it's a happy home. They're checking in. They're making sure everything is done. Projects are completed on time. But in a state of chaos like divorce is, they're missing that. And it's not intentional. And I do not fault the parents because they're doing the best that they can. But having me as an extra support person within that situation allows the kid not to miss something minor that can turn into something major down the line.
Yeah, and it's interesting because really the tutor is also not just in a therapeutic role, but in a parental role
Mm-hmm.
with checking up on the kids' academics. What happens when parents are not in touch with their kids' academic situations?
Oh, that can go a variety of ways. Do students feel neglected? They feel like their parents don't care. They feel like they're not important. And in the situation where there are multiple kids involved, there may be one that dives deeper into academics and does better because they're hyper focused on something they can control. So now the kiddo that actually struggles with school isn't getting assistance anywhere, and all they're hearing is, "Oh, my sister's so great, my brother's so great, but I got an A on my last test, but nobody said anything about it."
Mm, yeah. Wow. I was thinking also about what you said regarding options. Like we often in when we're in the middle of something, we're only thinking about the now. I'm in survival mode as a parent. I'm just getting through what I have to get through now. And we're not thinking about our kids and school and impact. But what happens when long term that we're not paying attention to our kids'
Great
academics?
question. I actually had another student like that I worked with. She was in her 10th grade year, if I remember correctly. And those are the pivotal years because your college is around the corner if that's the path that you choose. So with her situation, it was a little bit different because she was a very focused student, and it was more so her having to move houses in the middle of all that that threw her off. But I feel like had I not been there, that could have affected those grades. And when you're a year out from applying to colleges, those grades make a huge difference if that's what you really want to do. And if you want to get into a highly specialized field or something STEM based where you have to have the highest scores possible, then that could throw off what her dream school may be. She may not be able to get into the big school that she wants that has a higher GPA requirement because it was 1 year that she struggled and her normal 3.5 dropped to a 3.0. It's really difficult because you want to make sure you're positioning yourself so that when you get to the point that you're applying for colleges, you're proud of the scores that you're putting on the application.
Yeah. But Dominique, I remember you said too, even so, not every kid is going to be going off to college. But what about the kids who aren't going to go to college? Could tutors, could that still be helpful for kids
Yeah.
academically as well?
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that because that brings into the discipline side. If you think about it, a lot of parents that say their kiddos should go into the military, it's because they need more discipline. Well, if I have a student that is older, let's say junior year, and they're in control of their schedule, they know they know what they need to do to get from point A to point B. It doesn't mean they're going to college, but guess what? That's something for them to learn before they go into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had students that flake on their sessions and I text the parent and they're like, oh yeah, we were at the mall. So you didn't hold them accountable. They didn't hold themselves accountable. How is that going to translate when they start working their first adult job?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really tricky. Okay, so let's say you've sold me, my kid needs a tutor. I'm in the middle of craziness and I see all the benefits, but I don't even know where to start. Like, do I just ask someone at the local college? Like, how would I go about finding the best person for my kid, the best match?
Okay. With that, there are always tons of options.
I know, but I know
Some options.
you like certain options,
Yes,
and I know you're going to get
I
into the pros
do.
and cons. So get into the pros and
I'm biased. Because we have all the big name companies, and I'm not going to call anybody out because it may work for certain families. Go right ahead. But I will always tell any family, whether they use me or not, go with a smaller company. I wouldn't always say go with just an individual because the individual may not have the resources or the time to accommodate a large group of families or even multiple kids in one family. But if you go to a smaller tutoring company, they're able to really focus on you. You're not just being pushed through a CRM system and just being handed to people, or you're not just picking tutors off a job board. You're actually talking to somebody that is going to pay attention to your family. For example, with my team, I have certain tutors that have a wide range of capabilities. Like one person I just hired, she can work with anybody from 3rd grade to 12th grade. So imagine if you're a family that has 3 kids at different ages, she can work with any of them during that hour that you have her booked. So no matter which kid it is that need assistance, the younger kid may need 30 minutes, the big kid may need the other 30, or one kid may need the entire hour because they have an exam in the next 2 days. So we're able to match the tutor to your family instead of you just picking somebody off a roster.
Oh, and I didn't even think about that. I always assumed you have one child and that kid has one tutor for that hour or 2 hours, and there's no flexibility. So that's great to know.
Yes, I did that on purpose because when I first started my business, I was noticing that the families with multiple kids, every now and then the parent would be like, "Hey, my little one has a question. Do you have time to answer that question?" And I'm like, "Sure." And so when I developed my packages, I was like, I don't want it to be per kid. I want it to be per family. So I asked them about all their kids, even if the tutor only primarily works with one student, I'm still going to ask about the others because who's to say they don't have a random question or a random topic that they don't get and they just need 15 minutes of the tutor's time.
Yeah, well, I love that we've talked about the various roles that tutors can play. And again, they can be really intimate roles. So it's not just academics because kids have all these other needs. So when you as a family or as a parent are hiring a tutor, you're getting a lot more if you get a good one than just someone who's going to do the academics, and that a tutor could be someone that your kids really feel comfortable talking to. What about the concept of rapport? Like often with therapists or people that kids let in, we feel like there needs to be a good rapport. Do you feel like that matters, or what kind of comments do you have about rapport and the importance? Does a kid need that with a tutor?
Yes, you definitely need that. Every person, I don't care if you went to college or you just were in grade school, you had that one teacher that you couldn't connect with.
Yeah.
Like, and because you couldn't connect with them, you only got so much of the material. So that's another thing I look at. I ask about the kid. What do they like? Do they respond better to a male or female? Some students prefer females. I had one parent that asked me the age range of the tutor because she knew her daughter didn't really respond to people that were in her age bracket because it felt like another mother.
Right. Interesting. That's really interesting.
They tell me everything. And at the end of my consultations, and I do a consultation with every family that comes to my company. So they get me. You're going to talk to me at some point. But at the end, I ask, is there anything I need to know that I missed asking about or that you didn't comment on? Just tell me now so I can make sure I match your kiddo with the best tutor possible.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep hearing that there's an element of trust that matters a lot. And so this is amazing. I'm so glad that you and I connected because I didn't realize that there's this hidden resource that people would never even consider or realize, that a tutor can fill all these other roles that maybe many people in this community need for their kids. So I really appreciate that. Is there anything that I'm missing before you tell us how people can find you?
Anything that we missed? We've covered a lot in a very short amount of
I
time.
know. I know. Then how can people find you?
So you can go to my website, www.engagemindsacademy.com. You can message me on Instagram, any of my social medias. I will be the person answering. Or you can shoot me a text over to our main number, and that is 832-637-6691. And we will get you taken care of, because my number one goal is always make sure the kiddo is in the best position possible, so that when they get to that senior year and they're deciding what they want to do, they can choose and they're not forced into one path or another.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dominique, and we will definitely talk again soon.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye.